All right. Welcome back to the STR podcast, otherwise known as the Start the Rebuild podcast. I'm your co-host, Tim Fournier, alongside Ian Mills.
What's going on, everybody? It is episode 36 of the STR podcast, otherwise known as the Marcus Smart
Hmm.
episode.
That was one I was going to think of. You took one of mine. But I got two safeties.
Okay.
First one, former Raven Chuck Clark was number
Mm.
26. And one of my favorite safeties of all time for reasons you might not think, Jim Leonhard. Former
Oh,
Raven,
former
former
Bill.
Bill, so he's got the connection, and Wisconsin defensive coordinator and interim head coach in my
Yes.
time serving as an equipment manager for the Wisconsin football team, and now defensive backs coach and pass game coordinator for the Broncos defense.
I forgot.
Yeah.
I forgot his Wisconsin ties.
Wore
Yeah,
like
yeah,
four
yeah.
numbers in uh the NFL, but he wore 36 for the Ravens and the Bills.
Also, I hate to admit I did look this up, but Omri Caspi wore
One of
36.
our favorites.
One of our favorites. I think
Kings
with the
legend.
Cavs. When he was with the Kings, I don't think he wore it, but when he was with the Cavs, he wore it. And then Bills legend, Lawyer Malloy, little before
Mm.
our time,
I don't even
but
know who that is.
oh really? He
No.
um he played like 3 or 4 seasons with them at the start of the drought. I want to say like an '03, like the maybe it was after the Patriots' first Super Bowl, the Bills blew them out at home. Like the Bills won like 31-3 or something.
Is that
And I
one
want to say
like someone blew up Brady on the sideline?
yeah, well, I think that was either that was Sam Adams maybe or it was Lawyer Malloy. But one of them had a pick six, I think, and I think it was Lawyer Malloy. Um, Again, we were 2 years old then, so I didn't watch it live, but I've seen the highlights. And of course, the Patriots then became the Patriots, and the Bills didn't make the playoffs until we were 16 years old. So
Yeah, well, before we get into Bills stuff, because we have a lot to talk about.
yeah,
Um, you brought up Omri Caspi. Dude, the Kings. They've won 9 of their last 11.
yeah,
And
back in
they're
the
up to like I think they're the 7 or 8 seed, and they're only a game out of the 5 seed.
yeah. Is
They
Doug
they were
Christie the man?
terrible earlier in the year, and they thought it was going to be a lost season.
Is Doug Christie the guy?
I don't know. Do you feel like I don't actually know that much about the whole situation, but always
Sure.
like in I was thinking about this, like interim head coaches always scare me. And maybe that's more of an NFL thing, but I feel like at least in the NFL, whenever there's an interim head coach and then
You
they get
you get
signed
a
on for the
bump.
full-time job, they suck.
Yeah. Oh, interim head coaches in the NFL have like a 5 week bump where
Yeah. The
like
team feels they're
I
like
just
rejuvenated to fight for him, something.
earlier this year when the Bills had to play Jeff Ulbrich in his first game as an interim head coach right after they fired Robert Salah. I looked at it and like in the last like 30 interim head coaches, they were like 17 and 13 in their first game. Mind you, they're bad teams like that are
Yeah, you have
firing
to
their
be bad to fire a coach, right?
right. And so how are they above 500? Like that makes no sense. In their first
That is.
game and then once the juice kind of runs out and it's like, oh, this guy, he wasn't a head coach for a reason, whatever it might be. But yeah, I agree with you that like historically like that juice does run out. Um but I don't know, the NBA treats coaches so weirdly. Like they're
I
in and
also
out
think
so
like an
quickly.
NFL coach is more important than an NBA coach
I would say so.
because it's
I
the
would
NBA
say
is a
so.
lot less like structured play,
Yeah.
just basketball in general. I don't know though. Like I feel like then people take that too far and they say like the coach doesn't matter at all, which I don't think is the case either. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the reason for that bump is that it's human nature to like not want to be the person or be on the group that is like to blame for
Right.
like limited success or failures. And then when
Right.
there's a like like easily identifiable scapegoat that everyone is saying is the reason that you're not doing well, then like everyone wants to prove that that's true. So then they all like rally around to like start to win the next couple games or whatever because they want to prove that it's not their fault, it was this person's fault, which is just human psychology. And then they get that bump. I don't know if that's what's going on with the Kings right now. There was like weird stuff going on with Mike Brown and De'Aaron Fox. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were the last 2, 3 years like a team that kind of hovered around 500, right? And then they made they made well, I guess the one year was a 2 year when they actually made the playoffs. They were well above 500, but other than that year, they've kind of hovered around 500. Maybe they just needed a change of pace. Like I don't know. Like Mike Brown did great things for them. Like no doubt about that. Again, they snapped the playoff drought. They took the Warriors to what, 6 games?
The seven. And then
Was it
Curry had 15
7 games?
game seven, for
Yeah,
sure.
I think you're right. So he did great things, and it just so happened to be that they regressed like almost immediately after. The defense never got better. Um,
I don't even know if they regressed the next year really, because I think they had the same amount of wins pretty much. It was just then there was expectations involved.
well, they were only in the play-in, right? Because the year prior they weren't in the
Right, but
play.
I think the West as a whole
Just got
had like
better.
better records.
You might be right.
Let me double check that. Keep going on.
Yeah, but when you hover around 500, and expectations are to be the to make the playoffs, and you don't make the playoffs, like yeah, of course your job's going to be in, to some extent jeopardy. I mean, they just had given him an extension, but I guess my point here is when you're good, like when you have the talent to make the playoffs, right? And you're not making the playoffs, like that's kind of a big deal. And so yeah, winning 9 of 11, that's I don't know how much was shaken up, but like that's a good sign for Doug Christie, and hopefully they just make the playoffs again. Like that's sort of the thing is like I don't think anybody's thinking the Kings are gonna,
Win the
make a
title.
run, but like yeah, get to the playoffs. This is the team that should be in the playoffs. De'Aaron Fox is playing the best basketball of his career. Um, DeMar DeRozan had I don't know, like I think at the start of when he came to the Kings, it was sort of like, oh wow, he's older than we thought he was. And I think right now maybe he's just sort of kind of figuring out his role a little bit. And I think
Yeah.
that's another reason of this kind of hot streak.
Yeah. So I just looked it up and they won two less games and they went from I guess this doesn't say their seed, does it? But they were in the play-in and
They
the
lost to the Warriors.
yeah. But anyway, just kind of interesting because I watched the first like quarter of the game last night against the Warriors and it had me thinking about that. And then they won and they've won 9 of 11, which is pretty sick. For
De'Aaron
any big
Fox,
team. What's up?
De'Aaron Fox averaging 26 a game. He was
Yeah,
averaging
he's
like
been struggling the last few games with an
I was
injury.
gonna say he
Yeah.
was averaging like 30.
Yeah. He
Uh,
low key hit a rough patch, but he's got like a like his left like pinky or something is like broken and he like needs surgery, but it's a contract year, so he's like not getting it's I don't know. It's something weird like that.
Montes upon is 21 and 14.
Yeah, he's a beast. Malik
And
Monk's having a career year because he's getting more minutes and not just being just a six man. But yeah, so switching gears here. I think the biggest thing to talk about is kind of recap Bills Ravens a little bit and then forecast the future of those games. Um, so from Ravens perspective, really suck. I think they played well enough to win outside of the three turnovers, which were the difference in the game. I was kind of relieved to see that after the early two turnovers from Lamar, he didn't just like unravel. He kind of
Mhm.
stayed in it, fought back, and did enough to give his team a chance. And then the Mark Andrews stuff just like really sucks. I don't know what's gonna be the end of that because they actually have like some weird like contract stuff where Andrews and Likely are like kind of coming up for extensions at the same time, and like they're probably only gonna be able to pick one or the other, so that's gonna be interesting. But yeah. So from that game, Ravens' perspective, it really just came down to the turnovers, and then they had to kind of fight back, and they just kind of had untimely stuff. And something we were talking about right before this was how opportunistic the Bills' defense is, which I think needs to be celebrated. But they definitely need that to happen. I keep saying need. It would be huge if they could force another turnover or two next week. We're just unsure if that's going to happen with the Chiefs. Um, yeah, I'll kind of let you get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills, well, I'll jump off the turnover differential thing for a second. The Bills had the season best plus 24 turnovers in the regular season. They had their offense had just 8 turnovers, which was the lowest, tied for the lowest since 1933, which is an insane stat because they have played a lot more games now than they did in 1933.
Hmm.
The Bills rely, which is funny looking back on the history of Josh Allen led teams and Sean McDermott led teams.
Yeah.
They used to turn the ball over a lot. Now they don't turn over the ball at all. They haven't turned over the ball this playoffs. Um,
Just last
I don't.
year, they like Josh like led the league.
Yeah, Josh had like 20 turnovers. A lot of which were obviously interceptions. But it came down to the fact that like they made him throw the ball a million times a game. And that
Mhm.
was sort of the Bills' identity for a long time is they couldn't run the ball. And it was, all right, Josh, you're gonna throw the ball a million times. Yeah, you're gonna throw a couple picks, but you're gonna throw a lot more touchdowns, which was sort of the like the biggest gripe with Josh Allen was always his interceptions. But he also his interception percentage, right, percentage of his passes thrown was always like league average. Like it was never that high just because he threw the ball a lot.
Mhm.
I say this to say the Bills do not have to rely on Josh throwing a million times a game. They can run the ball. We've seen it in both these playoff wins for them. In the Broncos game, in the first half, I think at the end of the first half, Josh had like 70 passing yards last week. I think he had 70 again. And then, he threw more in the second half in both games. But when you're running the ball and they can't stop it, there's almost no need, like why, like there's no need for you to stop running the ball. And that happened in the first half of last week. That happened in pretty much the entire Broncos game. And the Bills are just leaning on defenses right now, and it's working. To jump back real quick on the Ravens, I think you're right. Like, yeah, obviously Lamar, the 2 turnovers in the first half were not good. The first interception ended up not mattering, or well, who knows if it would have mattered. But Bills didn't score off of it. Ravens get the ball right back. Um, but yeah, I mean, the 3 turnovers were huge. I think the Bills were very keen on playing mistake-free football
Mhm.
and not doing anything super dumb. But to some extent, that was maybe a little bit too conservative. I think you could bash them a little bit and say, hey, like you had a chance to go win the game on third and goal from the one,
That was an
and you lose
interesting. Yeah.
you lose a yard or two, and then now you have to force a field goal, and realistically, the Ravens could have tied the game up or should have tied the game up. So it's like, and then they had a couple drives in the first half where like I think it was the second drive in the first half. Bills have like a 3rd and 5, and they run a screen to Dawson Knox, and it's like you have Josh Allen, you're throwing a screen to Dawson Knox, like doesn't seem like maybe the greatest idea. Like they were playing a little bit conservative, but they were trying to control the clock, and it worked in their favor, albeit the Ravens had a chance to tie it at the end. Only thing I'll say about Lamar, uh, he played great in the second half. He played amazing in the second half. Really, I mean, he led the game tying drive. It just didn't so happen to work out in his favor. He said after the game, he seemed obviously very frustrated. Like, hey, you just got to hold on to the ball. Why can't I hold on to the ball? And that's fair. Like, I mean, that's a like I get the frustration. Anyone would be frustrated. Before the game, in his Wednesday press conference, he had like a kind of an interesting quote where he was like, I don't remember exactly I don't know what the question was, but his answer to it was he was like, yeah, everyone's posting that little interception return, like that pick six from the first time they played in the divisional round when Taron Johnson had a 99-yard pick six. And my first reaction to that was like, I was like, Lamar, what, get off Twitter. Like stop being like I hate to be like, oh, players don't be on Twitter, but like right? Like that can't be good for Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson's like psyche right now. No, don't go on Twitter. Like it's literally only going to be the
Yeah,
worst
right down.
discourse, the most disingenuous discourse for either of them, because people are going to obviously call Lamar a playoff choker and all this stuff right now when he literally led a game tying drive. If Josh Allen loses to Pat Mahomes this Sunday, they're going to call him a playoff choker, despite the fact that the Chiefs have one of the greatest dynasties of all time. They're literally in the middle of one of the greatest dynasties of all time. I don't think either of them, it's fair to call either of them playoff chokers, but like that's what's going to be said. My point is
Mhm.
saying this is like get off Twitter. Like, do not be looking at what Bills fans are saying about you before your game with the Bills. That's like whatever. It probably doesn't actually matter. But when he was turning the ball over twice, I was like, dude, he's doing too much. Like he's doing too much right now. And like he even said it on the fumble where it was an RPO where the snap was high, and by the time he got the ball, he couldn't throw the ball because all of his linemen were downfield. He had to run the ball, but he was surrounded by Bills. So when he went to go, he should have just gone. He even said he was like, I should have just gone down, but he tried to do too much. Tried to squeeze onto the ball and it slipped out.
Yep.
And it's like I can't go into the mind of Lamar Jackson, but it's like I do feel for him in that sense. It's like, man, you're trying to do too much, so much, and sometimes it kind of could bite you in the ass.
Yeah. Like I said, from Ravens' perspective, very disappointing. I thought it was very winnable. I think they could have won the game if they had any three of the turnovers. Um, if they only had two. Well, I guess the Bills didn't score off the pick, whatever. But I think the what I left most impressed by from that game was, the talk all week and what I kind of agreed with is that the Ravens were just like bigger and tougher up front.
Yeah.
Um, in the first half, I thought the Bills D line, like and front seven, really showed out. In the second half, they kind of, I don't know, got worn down or whatever, and it didn't really look. They like couldn't get a pass rush, and they had the drive where they just ran the ball every single play. But the
Mhm.
Bills' offensive line, like I knew the Bills' offensive line was very, very good, but I did not like the Ravens' defensive line is big and tough, and their front seven is the strength of the defense. I was very impressed by the Bills' ability to just come out up front and just like be like bullies. And I think that is what's going to carry like that what they should 1000% continue to keep leaning on in a game against the Chiefs because like we were talking about, I don't think the Chiefs are going to have those three turnovers. The Bills have to be opportunistic if the opportunity shows itself, but the Bills can still win because their offense is just so efficient at just chewing up gains of three, four, five, six, and it really starts and ends with the offensive line, and then obviously Josh in the run game. Um, I left very impressed with the Bills' ability to get movement up front. Did they have the most efficient run game ever? No, but the Ravens were the best run defense in the NFL, and that was the engine of their whole all of their production.
Yeah, I mean, I the Bills' run, rushing attack has been. You're right. It is. It starts and ends with the offensive line. Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins are playing career years right now. Connor McGovern didn't has like he didn't play center, before the Bills, and now he's a very good center. Like he's not an All Pro or anything, but like he converted to center and has been incredibly good. Um, David Edwards and Osiris Torrance are
Shout out Wisconsin, David
yeah.
Edwards.
Um, and the Bills have like I don't know the exact statistics, but they pull their tackles. They pull Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown like more than any team in the NFL. They do it a lot, and they do it because it's effective. Uh, um, so Aaron Cromer, their offensive line coach, deserves a lot of credit for that. Kind of getting because if you remember a couple years ago, like it wasn't on the Bills' offensive line was horrible, but it was always like league average.
Hmm.
And they didn't do too much to change it, right? Like Spencer Brown just developed into like he was the way people talked about Spencer Brown a couple years ago was we need to replace this guy. This
People
guy
didn't
is not
even love
good.
the
And
extension.
now he's considered and then they gave him the extent. Yeah, exactly. And now he's considered one of the better right tackles in the NFL,
Right.
especially in the run game. Um, so and then Dan Dawkins is now. I know he didn't make the All Pro, but he certainly was in talks to make be an All Pro this year. He's always been like on the cusp of Pro Bowl caliber guy, but he's having one of his best years ever right now. Um, and then of course you have Josh Allen, who we saw last week, like, oh, 4th and 2, like just run Josh. Just give him the ball and he'll find whatever gap and get in there and run over a guy or two. Um, and also, I mean, did you hear what Spencer Brown now that we're talking about Spencer, did you hear what he said yesterday at Bills practice? You're asking him, have you given it any thought what's going to happen after this game? Right? Like, you don't want to think about going to the Super Bowl, right? You don't want to get yourself, but like, what have you thought about? And he goes, yeah, it's either going to be super celebration time or me and a 24 pack by myself.
Mhm.
And which is funny because I thought that was very funny. But then a couple of people were kind of concerned, and I was like, no, 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 it's whatever.
He's
But
from Northern Iowa. He can put it down.
yeah, he'll be all right.
He's a UNI guy, right?
Yeah, he went to Northern Iowa. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I think if you look at the first game between the Bills and the Chiefs, like Pat Mahomes is not going to turn the ball over on the first play of the game.
No,
It's like, yeah, it's not gonna happen. So yeah, you're right. You kind of have to be very efficient. Like
I don't
you
think
need,
Mahomes has thrown an interception in like his last 10 games.
I think you'd be right. I don't know the
Let
last time
alone, I
Josh.
mean, but the Bills also have a obvious knack for turning the ball over on defense. So,
I also don't know the last time Josh threw an interception. Um,
but true.
but the Chiefs will find a way to win. Like the Chiefs, like they don't. I don't even think they need turnovers. They just find a way to do whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'll say with the offensive line stuff too. The Ravens have a very like physically imposing defensive line, but they don't have like a stud like one-on-one pass rusher that can just like decide to win. So it'll be interesting to see where Chris Jones lines up and how he does too.
yeah, that's gonna be big because it's if there is a game wrecker for the Chiefs defense, it is him.
Hmm.
Uh, so there'll be a lot of talk about him, reasonably so. Something I was gonna say. I also think the Bills not having a wide receiver one kind of helps them in some ways.
They don't feel
Um,
like they have to, change a game plan that's working.
right, that's exactly it. And then when you're going up with a team who has a shutdown corner, like who do you follow?
Yeah, you essentially just eliminate the advantage of having why can't I think of his name? Corner from
Trent
Washington.
McDuffie?
Yeah,
Trent
Trent
McDuffie?
McDuffie. You essentially just eliminate the benefits of having Trent McDuffie.
Right, exactly. And it's like you look at the Broncos game in like Pat Surtain, like he was covering Matt Collins at some points.
Yeah, he's essentially useless.
It's like, and they were still throwing to Matt Collins, and it's like, like Curtis Samuel, he was on Curtis Samuel at points. Like, if Trent McDuffie's covering Curtis Samuel all game, not that he will be doing this, he obviously will not be. Curtis Samuel's not going to play every snap, but if he's covering Curtis Samuel or Matt Collins all game, then like you're thinking to yourself, like, I will take that. Like, we're absolutely going to take that. We'll throw to
Mhm.
Khalil Shakir, we'll throw to Dalton Kincaid. Reasonably, he'll probably, if you had to pick someone to cover to follow, would be Amari Cooper. Um, but they don't, like, he hasn't
Doesn't
done
even
much.
play. Might as well not even be on the team.
He plays, he doesn't play a million snaps a
Out of
game,
all
but
the receivers, does he get the fourth most snaps?
Khalil Shakir and Matt Collins, I think, get the most. I'm almost positive
I
about
feel like
that.
Keon gets more snaps too, or even Curtis Samuel. I don't even like he's not consistently outsnapping those two. He might be fifth.
I'm gonna look this up. I'm gonna look this up. Bum 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 bum. Yeah, Matt Collins, I was right about him. Keon Coleman, you're right. Khalil. Curtis Samuel, and then Amari. But wait, I actually don't know if
Is that like total snaps for the year
this
for the
might
Eagles?
be it might be total snaps.
Yeah.
Let me see.
But anyway, um,
Because Marquez Valdez Scantling was like right below them, and I'm like,
yeah, it's probably total snaps. But anyway, it's going to be a very good game. I think coming out of the Ravens game, I was saying like I'm worried about the Bills against the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to win. But I also said like I know my Ravens fandom is probably giving me bias right now, so I'm going to give it a few days before I like solidify that take. And the more and more I've sat with it, the less I'm not going to sit here and say like the Bills are definitively winning or the Chiefs are definitively winning. But at first, I
mm.
was like, I'm really worried about the Bills and I don't like them in this game. And the more I've sat with it, like I think they have just as much a chance. Um, on the other side, um, from a Bills perspective, I would assume if the Bills were to win, you would rather play the Commanders.
Yeah, I think that's
Even though their
fair.
offense is better than the Eagles.
Right, but the Commanders rush the rush defense is bad. Uh, and I think that's like if we're talking about biggest strength for the Bills right now, it's obviously their offensive line. Biggest weakness for the Commanders is probably the rushing defense. I mean, I think that's kind of a ma matchup made in heaven. Um, Also, like as good as the Bills were last week against the run, they still struggled in the second half. If Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson can wear down the Bills in the running attack, I think Saquon Barkley absolutely can as well, right? Like that could be a concern if they play the Eagles. So yeah, reasonably, if you're a Bills fan, I think you should definitely want to play the Commanders over the Eagles. If
Can the
yeah,
Commanders have a chance?
um, kind of for the reasons I just said, no. But at the end of the day, we said they didn't have a chance last week. Again, I don't expect the Eagles to turn the ball over what 4 times like the Lions did.
Yeah.
And of course, but Jaden Daniels is Jaden Daniels. Like Jaden Daniels could come out there and have the most preposterous game for the eighth week in a row.
I think the Commanders' offense is consistent enough, and the Eagles, at least passing offense, is inconsistent enough that they will have a chance. I wouldn't pick it to happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't like them with the points, but
yeah, that's fair. I just feel like I mean it's when you look at Saquon Barkley, I mean Saquon had an insane game last week and they almost lost. So, maybe I'm shouldn't think about that too much. But like the way he's been playing, I don't see him slowing down against the Commanders defense. Um, and the Eagles almost lost to them. No, excuse me, the Eagles. Let me repeat this. The Commanders almost lost to the Eagles with Kenny Pickett playing the game and the Eagles turning the ball over 5 times.
yeah. Jaden Daniels also put up 35 points and threw 5 touchdowns. I was looking at that too.
Wait, did the Eagles turn the ball over 5 times or the Commanders?
I know the Commanders turned the ball over a couple times,
Maybe I'm misremembering this game.
but
Point is,
let me check this quick. They played the
looking it up
Eagles
right now.
and they won 36-33, and Kenny
The
Pickett
Commanders turned the ball over 5 times. That's what it was. I think they were all
and like
fumbles.
Jaden Daniels
Oh no,
still
Jaden.
threw 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. All right.
So
Yeah,
it's
they
like,
fumbled the ball three.
yeah, Brian Robinson had 2 fumbles and Jaden Daniels threw 2 picks at least.
Yami
And
Brown.
Miami Brown fumbled something.
So
So like that's like if Jaden Daniels is gonna go out and score 35 points,
right.
they have a they definitely have a chance to win the football game because I don't know how like even the mismatch that is the Commanders defense versus the Eagles offense and their offensive line and everything, I'm not like 100% like sure the Eagles can score 35 points just because of the inconsistencies in the passing game. Like they could run for 200
Yeah,
yards before 28 for sure. 27 for sure. They could, and Saquon could have 2 touchdowns and 250 yards. But if it's only 27 points and Jaden Daniels is going to put up 35,
right.
I mean, like the math doesn't like add up.
I'm trying to, yeah, the Commanders had the third worst rushing defense in the NFL this year.
Yeah. I always, it's so weird. I always like reference that stat and look at it. And then a lot of times I feel like I watch the Commanders and it's like, I don't feel like they're getting gashed. And I think part of that is because they, um, their offense is so consistent that teams like can't always just run the ball every play. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. I
That's
mean,
like eye test, like no statistics to back that up.
last week, Jahmyr Gibbs had 105 yards on 14 carries.
Right, but they could only get him 14 carries. Like, I don't know. That game was also
Yeah,
just
that's true.
both
That's
teams
true.
every play.
I'm looking at last week's stats, and it's funny because the Commanders gave up 201 rushing yards on 23 carries, but there was a 61-yard rushing touchdown by Jameson Williams that
Yeah.
counts towards that. But it is bizarre to me. I mean, I understand why they didn't run the ball more, but the Lions probably should have ran the ball a little bit more.
But they
Uh,
were down 10 the whole game. It's like you can't.
yeah, that's true. But
But I don't think the Eagles will turn the ball over 4 times. The Lions turn the ball over 4 times, right?
uh, yeah, they had four interceptions, three by Jared, one by Jameson Williams.
Right. And one of
Oh, they
them
had five
was
turnovers.
six, and one of them was in the end zone. So
Yeah,
there's
they had
a
five.
15-point swing in there. I don't think you can count on the Commanders to have another 14-point swing. Um, and the Eagles' defensive line is much better than the Lions. Their defense is overall just much better. The offense is less consistent though, where if Jaden Daniels is going to be hyper efficient like he has been every single game this year, and they put up 35 points, they have a puncher's chance for sure.
Yeah,
That's where I
two of
kind
them.
of land. If I had gun to my head, who am I picking to win the game? The Eagles, and I think the spread's 6.5.
Yeah, it is.
I'd probably still take the Eagles there just because it's under a touchdown, but I think the Commanders definitely have a chance.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, I think Jaden Daniels gives him a shot. Um, they sort of have to. It's gonna sound stupid, but I feel like the offense sort of has to play not perfect, but close to it. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do. Like that wouldn't surprise me if they do it.
Hmm.
Also, five turnovers for the Lions in divisional game. That is bad.
Yeah.
Before we stop talking about football, I know we're almost done, but which coaching hire so far has intrigued you the most? So I think there's only been three, right? Aaron Glenn, Mike Vrabel, and Ben Johnson. And I think all of them, we sort of knew they were going to be head coaches this time around. Was there
Mhm.
one that kind of grabbed your? I think that's the only ones, right? There's not. I think that's just the three.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most intriguing one is Ben Johnson to the the Bears. I mean, the uh the idea of his creativity combined with Caleb Williams is just like, what the heck is going to happen there? I am still a firm believer in Caleb Williams, the talent. I know so many people think he sucks now, and I think Jaden Daniels being so good kind of like added to people's perception. First of all, it's like very hard to actually come up with any statistical like argument that he was like a bust and terrible this year. And there are people that talk about him like that, and then it's simply because of the expectations that were on him. He was by no means like great, but I think he also like eye test stuff like also showed that his talent plays in the NFL. Like him like
He
breaking
had
out of sacks and stuff and the arm talent and everything is like it translated, it's there, it's still like very high level.
he had almost like identical passing stats to Jalen Hurts this year.
Yeah.
Like Jalen Hurts had 18 touchdowns, five interceptions, less than 3,000 yards. Caleb Williams had 20 passing yards. Of course, Jalen Hurts also rushed the ball for I think like 600 yards. So that needs to be counted for. I agree with you though. And Caleb had 400. He had almost 500 rushing yards. So
Yeah.
there's that too. Um, I agree with you. Caleb Williams is better than people give him credit for. I think calling him a bust is ridiculous. I think it's one of two things. I think just we want to call everyone a bust now. We're kind of in that
Yeah.
day and age where like we're really like Bryce Young. Even the Panthers were ready to call him a bust, and we don't know if he's a bust yet. Still, I think he
You got to give these guys more time, dude.
give him more time. Secondly, Caleb Williams was considered like the second coming, right? He was like the next Andrew Luck. People wanted to hate this guy too.
Yeah.
Like people wanted to hate the sensitive, right? Not in a bad, I'm not saying sensitive in a bad way, but the guy who's more than okay with showing his emotion, the guy who paints his fingernails, the guy who, you know, went to USC and was a Heisman but never really won anything at USC. Like people wanted to dislike this guy.
Right.
And
Keep going. I'll be
I
right
think you're good. And then of course, I think the Bears also get this sort of, you know, LOL Bears, kind of like the Mets are treated in MLB. It's like people just sort of act as if they at all times are kind of a meme because historically speaking, they have been. So when anything bad happens to them, it sort of gets accentuated. But yeah, I like Caleb Williams. I think he played fine his rookie year. I think he ran into too many sacks. That was sort of the big. I mean, of course, he evaded a lot of sacks too, but he ran into a lot of other ones. I think that offense was everyone's saying kind of like he had the best system, but then you look at the system around him, or surrounding cast, I should say, and you look at the surrounding cast around him, and it's like who around him was like the most impressive guy. It was like, yeah, DJ Moore. We love DJ Moore. He's obviously a good receiver. Keenan Allen's over the hill. Rome Odunze, we don't really know what he is. I think it's too early to tell on him. Their offensive line was bad, and they couldn't run the ball this year. So it's like, oh, he had the best supporting cast. He had the best supporting cast. They went 7-9 last year, or 7 or 8-9, whatever the record was, and like for an 8-9 team to get the first overall pick is rare. But like they were not a good supporting cast. Like, and I know I probably said even beforehand, like, wow, it's going to be crazy, like all these 8 and 9 team, but like when your offensive line is as bad as it was, when DJ Moore is DJ Moore, like that's a good receiver. I'm not going to take it away, but like Keenan Allen showed this year, like he's just, and I think some people even knew this ahead of time, but it's like he is over the hill at this point. We saw, you know, this year, and they were running screens on 3rd and 5 against the Seahawks with him, and it's like you're running a screen with Keenan Allen,
Right.
but
I also think people forget that he had like,
um,
oh, sorry, you cut out there. I think people
no,
also
you're good, you're good.
forget that he had like full games of being very good this year. And they also started off 4-2, and then the next game they lost on a Hail Mary, which he didn't play well in, but they very easily like they were had a winning record and things kind of fell apart. But he had, I'm looking at the stats now, like they lost the overtime game to Minnesota, and he threw for 340 yards, had 30 more rushing yards and two touchdowns. Like he had full games of being like of mistake. The next week they played the Lions and he had 250 and three touchdowns and no turnovers. Like he had full on like games and stretches of playing very well. Like this was not all just like a struggle. Like the team struggled the whole year pretty much, but he definitely like showed he.
Also, I'm looking now. You're right. He had 4 interceptions in his first 3 weeks, and then 2 interceptions the rest of the year. I know
Right.
that's not the end all be all,
He took too many
but like I
sacks
think
and
those
yeah.
this first couple of games sort of gave people their opinion of him already. like the fact that he came out and like threw for less than 100 yards in a win, and then play on Sunday Night Football against the Texans, threw
Mhm.
two interceptions and they lost. Like that kind of, I don't want to say sealed his fate, but
Where they didn't block anyone and he was just under immediate pressure every single play. So I'm very excited to see what Ben Johnson does when he gives him some more creativity and just like easy buttons in the offense.
I think yeah, if there is like with Caleb, like there are times where he can evade a sack, but also there's times where he needs to hang in there and let the ball rip. Like
Mhm.
there are too many times he's backpedaling, or running backwards, and it's like takes a big sack, and it's like you should probably should just let it go, and maybe that's because there's nobody open or whatever. But that's if there's one thing to like actually critique him for, I think it's something like that. Yeah, they went on a crazy losing streak this year, yeah.
Yeah, and they lost like 12 straight or something.
So, and then they beat the
But,
Packers.
yep, just to hurt their draft stock. But yeah. So I guess we can kind of move on from the sports talk a little bit.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
Kind of told you before, I'm starting an internship next week, so it's going to be very interesting once my kind of schedule really picks up here. Um, Maybe this is something you can provide some insight on in terms of like working full-time job, and I'll be doing school. Um, well, this is an internship and it's not going to start off full-time, but like obviously I'm going to get there. Um, like just making time to like do the stuff you want to do because there's stuff I want to train for physically, like workouts and stuff like that, and I want to keep making content. And I think I've I'm lucky that I've had this time and it's helped me like put systems and routines into place where like I should be able to make the time. But I don't know if you have any insight on tips and tricks
I
and
mean,
overall thoughts.
I think it'll make you sort of, I mean, you were getting at it, make you appreciate your off time more.
Hmm.
And that was sort of the big thing for me when I was working in college full time, was like whenever I actually had time to myself, I really appreciated it. I made the most of it. And it was like, and some of making the most of it is just resting and playing video games or hanging out.
Hmm.
Um, and those are so I look back and it's like you feel so earned, right? Like you feel like you've earned it when you're working that much, which is really cool. But in terms of like juggling the two, I don't think there's any perfect recipe, perfect formula for any scenario. um but when I typically was really good at was separating one from the other. Like if I'm focusing on one thing, I'm like the task at hand, right? I think that's worry about where your feet are like at the moment. And I think we talked about that on the pod before, but like wherever your feet are at the actual moment, like putting 100% in that, and then understanding like, okay, like later after class, I got to go to my internship or vice versa. Um, it also makes you better at prioritizing which one's more important to you. For me, it became I prioritized my job
Hmm.
over school. And but I still had to find ways to like find the balance of, okay, I want to do well in school, but I know I don't care about this as much as I do work.
Right.
So what can I do to give most of my effort to work while still doing well in school?
Hmm.
And uh, it depends on the what classes you're taking, things like that. For me, it was like what I would do is I'd go to class most of the time and just do homework there or whatever. Um, and then there's certain nights where it's like, yeah, you're just up until 3 a.m. because you don't get. I mean, I work till midnight most nights, so my situation is probably a little bit different than yours. But like, yeah, I would just get out of work and then okay, time to do homework now. But I think the good thing is, man, it really does help you appreciate like your Friday nights or your Saturday nights so much more because it's like it does feel earned. You don't feel like you feel like you can not do whatever you want, but like you've earned so much credit in your mind because of how much work you've done.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, I'll have a drink or two, and not feel guilty about it. Um, and of course, there's health aspects of that, but like for me, it was really like that was big. Although I will say on that front, my ability to like cook diminished so badly during that. Like I was eating so bad because I didn't have any time to actually make anything good. Like everything I ate was frozen
Hmm.
or fast food, which is obviously not good. But that would be if there's a bunch of takebacks from it, but my diet was pretty bad during that time. So obviously, if there's anyone who pays attention to that type of things, it's you. So I don't think I wouldn't be worried about that if I was you. But like that was something that I look back on. I'm like, yeah, I was bad with how I ate.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that insight because I will definitely be prioritizing my job and work over school,
Yeah,
but I'll still need to do well in school. And I definitely, you know, am looking forward and didn't really think about the aspect of just appreciating, when you do something with fun with your friends on the weekends, like you'll appreciate it way more
for
when
sure,
you feel like you've like gotten through so much.
for
In
sure.
this
It's
time
like
period, I've been just like the weekends are coming, and it'll just be like, dang, like I don't really have anything going on. I'm just like waiting to go out with my friends, and then it's just like, I don't know, a little less exciting and just like blah blah blah. And now this is gonna be ramping up. Um, I think that'll be a hidden positive.
yeah, it's something you like. You're you keep your head down and you're working and you're working and you're working, and then all of a sudden it's Friday, and you're like, oh, like I'm tired, but it's like I've earned this, right? Like
Yeah.
it was a pretty cool feeling where it was like you put your head down and almost forget what day it was, and because of all this work you're doing, and then all of a sudden, like it goes by quickly. It
Hmm.
does go by quickly. And it's yeah, it was cool. It definitely felt like yeah, looking back on it, it's like everything, the work burning yourself out can be bad, but it also um can make you feel very, you know, fulfilled in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, goals for this week. We might have to do an early. We might have to do a quick turnaround in the next pod. So I guess maybe this weekend or early parts of next week.
Yeah. I don't have a day off for like the next speaking of burning out, I don't have a day off for a couple of days for like a week.
Yeah.
Uh, um so get through this week of work, but also I mentioned it last week, gotta be better at taking like actually taking steps, like getting my steps up. So I want to keep doing that.
Definitely. My goal, kind of fun. I'm doing running a 5K this weekend, and the goal is sub 20 minutes, which is going to be very difficult.
I was gonna ask, like, what's that? Yeah,
It's like just under like literally like 6:29 pace. So I was gonna say just under 6:30
I
pace.
believe in you. I think you can do
I
it.
I've been cutting pretty aggressively in terms of like dieting, and I've ran two 5Ks that were 20 minutes, 20 seconds. So I would need to fully PR. Um, and I will say I'm going to like adequately eat and carb up before it, which should definitely help. And the race day adrenaline. So I'm hoping that just gives me a 25-second bump for the whole thing. But where I train and run is also very flat, and I have no idea how hilly this course is. So it could end up just not mattering at all, and it's just super hilly, and I just get destroyed by that. But I think there's also a chance, like if I fully prep myself, race day adrenaline, and I ran where I normally run, I think I could squeeze out a sub 20. But I don't know what the course is going to look like. But it's still the goal. It's a lofty
I
goal,
know.
and I will be very proud of myself if I hit it. But what's the point of having a goal that's going to be easy?
Exactly. Great point. Great point.
Right. So with
Goals.
that, that's where we're going to end the episode 36, the Jim Leonhard episode. So leave a like, leave a comment, Ian Rizface, subscribe, hit that bell, press one of the buttons, please.
comment, and you could be on an episode.
And then next week we have episode 37, where I randomly just thought of one fan favorite, Javorius Buck Allen,
Wow.
37, more passionately known as Truckstick Buckstick. All right. Peace out, everybody.